Hello and welcome to the Metacognition.org.uk CPD video on Knowledge Organisers. In this video, we will be looking at how you use Knowledge Organisers and why you should be using them. So in our other video, we looked at the design of Knowledge Organisers. If you've not had a look at that CPD video yet, go and check it out so that when you're using Knowledge Organisers, you're producing the best ones possible. But for this session, we are going to be looking at why you should use them and how you should use them. To begin with, we need to understand what a knowledge organiser is. There's a lot of misconception around this area, and there's also a lot of poor practice out there, typically from there not being high-level quality explanations of what knowledge organisers are. Hopefully we'll be able to address that today. So, knowledge organisers are short documents. This is extremely important. You do not want a booklet. You do not want several pages. Really, you want one side of A4. And you're only including facts you would expect students to transfer to their long-term memory. If you don't expect a student to memorize a fact, it shouldn't be on your knowledge organizer. So you might need them to learn key formulas or dates in history or a process in geography, whatever it might be. That is fine, include it on your knowledge organizer. But if you do not need a student to learn and memorize that information, don't include it. So it is basically it's less than a revision book. It is just the core facts, the core understanding you need to access that topic. So, like I mentioned, that might be the angles in a triangle add up to 180 degrees, or the key dates in the build-up to World War I. They are key pieces of information for those respective topics and things that you would expect students to put into their long-term memory. Now, knowledge organisers support teaching and they support revision. They are not a replacement. A lot of people do think that they replace teaching. They don't. It is simply a scaffold or a resource that can be used to support your teaching and should be embedded within your teaching, revision and homework strategies. The same for students. Being provided with a knowledge organiser is not a revision source. It helps revision, but it is not for revision, and we'll get on to how students need to use them effectively later on. Knowledge organisers are very labour intensive to produce, and there are many good examples online. You can probably find all the knowledge organisers you need for your subjects online, but they will not be following the guidelines set out in our other video on what a good knowledge organiser looks like. It is worth spending the time producing knowledge organisers to a very high quality. If you are just putting together sort of a slapdash knowledge organiser, it's wasting your time. The buy one, buy twice sort of phraseology goes quite well here. If you try to produce a couple, 3, 4, 5 quite quickly, you're just going to have to go back to them, do them again, and in the end you'll be spending more time doing that than if you'd have just done it properly in the first place. So do it once, do it right. That's the important message here. And understand that it will take time. It probably will take you 2 or 3 hours to produce the first one as you start to get your head around it. As with everything, it will get quicker, especially for topics that you are more familiar with, but the time needs to be put aside to do it properly. Now, the purpose of them is extremely important. We need to understand why we're doing it, and we need to be able to translate that back to our students. So, they provide students with the core facts they must learn. This provides you with a non-negotiable. Students cannot complain about not knowing something or not knowing what they needed to know if you give them a knowledge organizer. It becomes a very strict routine within your class that they should learn or they must learn all of the facts on that knowledge organizer. It becomes a non-negotiable and hence it becomes a lot easier to enforce within your classroom. So you'll often get students saying, oh, I didn't know I needed to learn that bit. Oh, I didn't know that was a fact I needed to know. As soon as you've got a knowledge organizer introduced, those excuses will start to stop. There'll always be some, but if it's on the knowledge organizer and students are trained while they're using them, they will come to the conclusion that they do need to learn everything that's on there. If it's on there, they need to know it. End of story. Students are less likely to fall behind as well. So if a student is out of class for any period of time for whatever reason, if they need support on homework, if they are doing work in detention, a knowledge organizer can always be there for them. If they've got that core set of facts that they need for a topic, then they've already got a head start. If you've missed a lesson and you don't take a book home to copy up, then you've lost out on that learning. If you've got those key facts on a knowledge organizer, you can at least know them. You can at least start to memorize them. You can at least put them into your long-term memory. Yes, you might not have had the ability or the opportunity to apply them to problem-solving questions or exam questions, but at least you have the core facts. You have a document listing them all. That means you are not going to fall too far behind. Now, one of the fantastic areas with knowledge organisers and why they link in so well with metacognition is that they help to develop your schema or schemata formation within a student's brain. So what we mean here is that you can start to piece together the knowledge organisers and show how topics link together. So if I take the example of solving equations, a lot of students don't think that has any impact on, for example, geometry. But as soon as they see algebra within a question on, say, triangles, they know that they can form an equation that's equal to 180 degrees and solve from there. So they can start to see how two different topic areas can link together, and they can start to develop those schemas within their head, which are so important at developing that further and deeper understanding and are more helpful in those application questions. It's a really useful thing to do in teaching as well, just to bring out your different knowledge organisers and show the links between them and show what you've done previously and what you're doing now and how it all links together. It's a very nice feeling for students to see how all of their learning links together as well. And it's a lot more rewarding than doing distinct topics and different units. Reducing cognitive load, this is a massive thing. So if you're not familiar with cognitive load, sort of the overview is that you can only deal with a very small amount of information at one point. And this is sort of in your short-term memory, the stuff you're dealing with in your brain right at this second. So I've put everything into bullet points on my presentation so that you can just focus on one bullet point at a time. Now, we want students to be able to transform information from their short-term memory into their long-term memory. They can only do that if they're not overloaded. Now, a knowledge organizer prevents students from being overloaded. Students can focus on one specific section, one specific set of facts, one specific part per lesson. Reducing that cognitive load will help them to transfer that information into their long-term memory. Now, it's an incredibly important scaffold as well, and it builds from this cognitive load idea as well. So this scaffold is extremely helpful in class. If you've got students who are struggling to maybe recall all of the facts, so if they can't remember all of their angle facts or all of their formula, they can just get their knowledge organizer out. This helps reduce cognitive load as well. If students are trying to remember less, that's from their long-term memory, they can start to actually apply it and learn it properly. If students are trying to juggle all of the facts and apply them to a problem-solving question or exam question, something's not going to go well. They're going to forget some facts or they're going to forget how to answer the question. If you're taking away some of that load, you're going to be helping them. It's a huge help for homeworking as well. So often students come in with homework and say, I don't know how to do it. I couldn't remember the facts. Well, if they've got a knowledge organizer, that excuse goes then. If they've got the core facts written down on one side of A4 paper, they've got everything they need to be able to support their homeworking. So that might be actual homework tasks, that might be revision, that might be additional curricula, it might be whatever they're doing at home, but they've got the document there that they need to support them. And obviously we've got our SEN support there as well. So as we mentioned, it can be used in class, it can be given to TAs, it can be given to other assistants, and they can help use this to support those students who might need a little bit of additional support. So the reason I put this in is often people are looking for additional scaffolds that you can introduce, and they can be used for SEN students. But obviously we do need to remember here that a lesson that can be accessed by any student is going to be a good lesson for all students. So these knowledge organisers work for students who might struggle the most, SEN or not, and so they will work for the students who will struggle the least as well. We've got to remember that. Now, there's a few more purposes, and we're going to continue with them now. So it's a key revision tool supporting the development of sticky knowledge. So by the sticky knowledge is that knowledge which is going from your short-term memory to your long-term memory, i.e. you are remembering it, you will be able to remember it in a month, 2 months, a year, and you will be able to apply it to questions and problems. So we'll get onto the methods of how to do this later, but this is one of the best strategies to use to support students in transferring this information. It also helps to build fluency before you move on to these problem-solving questions and these exam questions. So, like we've mentioned, students will struggle with these types of problems unless they have a strong command of all of the facts they need. Having a knowledge organiser means that you can spend a lesson or two cementing that knowledge, cementing the facts, the dates, the formula, the processes, and then you can start to apply that to your problem solving. So it really helps to scaffold the teaching, and it really helps to scaffold a student's learning and development. Knowledge organisers, should be shared with parents and guardians, so most schools will put them up on their website. It means that you've got a direct connection with home, and it means that parents and guardians are more able to support students at home. Now, obviously, these would be extremely useful in this current crisis where we've got a lot of parents and guardians doing the teaching at home while schools are off. Now, if you've already got a knowledge organiser prepared, it really helps for home support. Often, especially when you get to secondary, the content level is too high for a lot of parents, and myself included. I might teach maths, but I would not be very good at helping to support a student in science or history, probably. So it's the same for a lot of parents. We might have one topic which we're good at, but we're not going to be at the best level in every single subject. So having that core set of facts will just really help to support at home. It'll help to keep parents and guardians in the loop. They'll know what's being taught, they'll know how to support, and it stops any misconceptions being reinforced at home, which is a massive issue with homework. It's fantastic for teacher knowledge. So in terms of your individual CPD, it can help you identify the actual key facts you need a student to learn. So this is possibly more helpful for early career teachers, but it's very helpful for anyone who's really trying to get their head around a curriculum, especially when we've got a new curriculum embedded. So if you're not quite that familiar with what you need students to learn, going through this process will really support you in deciding what information is needed and what information isn't needed. It's also extremely helpful if you're having to cover other subjects. So often a lot of teachers have to come in and cover maths. If there aren't enough teachers, having that knowledge organiser can really help to support them, and it can really help to support long-term cover as well. If you've got long-term supply in your school, then it can be really helpful to be able to provide them with the knowledge organisers to support them and their delivery of content. So I've told you why they're useful. I've told you in my previous video how you need to design them. We now need to understand how to use them. If you're not using them properly, or if you're not using them at all, it's a waste of time, and there's no point wasting your time if you've gone to all of that effort to design them. So one method, one of 14 I think we've got, is for students to produce flashcards for certain sections, and this is why you need to label the different sections. So if you've got a section that is your keywords and definitions, get students to transform this information into flashcards and get them to self-test, test in pairs, test in groups, low-stakes testing. This is going to come up over and over and over and over again in this video and all of my videos. The best way for students to learn is to do low stakes testing. No pressure, no stress, no real need for revision, just get them testing each other. Get them really thinking. The deeper a student is thinking, the better they are going to learn and retain that information. So producing these into flashcards with, say, a key date and a key event on the opposite side will really start to strengthen a student's knowledge of that topic. As we've kind of just mentioned, you can get students to test each other on content. So yes, you might have put them into a flashcard format, but equally you might say, student A, you're going to test student B on section 1, and student B will then have to try to recall all of the information from that section. Notice here, the recall of that information without scaffold is what is supporting that student learning. What can they remember? What can they recall from their long-term memory, i.e. what have they cemented into their long-term memory? You can get students to revise a section of the Knowledge Organiser as homework. So you can send students home and say, I need you to learn all of the keywords in section 1. I need you to learn all of the key dates from section 3. It's a very easy way to set homework. Instead of printing off a sheet, finding an online resource, whatever it might be, if you know that all students have got Knowledge Organisers, if you know they're available online in case students have misplaced them, it's very easy just to say, go and revise section 3. It reduces your workload, but it also provides an extremely effective homework that provides them with instant feedback. Rather than you giving them a sheet, taking it in, increasing your workload and giving them feedback or maybe a week or two later, when really it's not that effective, they can get instant reward by revising at home. Once you've given it to them as a homework, you can build on that as well. So often it's difficult to build on the homework, it's disjointed. Getting them to revise a specific section on the Knowledge Organiser means that you can test them on that section of the Knowledge Organiser in the next lesson. If you want to test them on those keywords, if they've done their homework, they will know those keywords. A lot of schools also employ the method of flipped learning. It's not something I'm convinced about by myself, and it's not something that research I truly believe shows is that impactful. But a lot of schools do employ flipped learning. And so if you give them those facts and that knowledge that they must know, it reduces the possibility of them building misconceptions. That's my greatest concern with the flipped learning, where you're getting students to revise and learn ahead of you teaching them the content, but they're not going to understand it and they're just going to develop misconceptions. Well, if they're working from a knowledge organizer, it's more difficult to develop misconceptions. If you're just giving them the basic facts that they must learn, it will reduce the possibility of them getting confused. So you might say, next week we're starting our topic on geometry. Here is your knowledge organizer. I want you to go and utilize your effective revision strategies to go and learn as much of this information as possible, ready for us to begin the topic. Easy homework, gets you started, gets you ahead of the curriculum, and everyone is happy. Now, in the planning section of Metacognition on our site, we are going to be providing a lot of CPD on the use of graphic organisers. Now, graphic organisers and knowledge organisers are different things. They might both have organisers in the name, but they do hugely different things. You will need to go and check out our graphic organiser videos, templates, and information to make sure that you are clear on the differences. But in short, a graphic organiser is a way for students to put down their thoughts, their thinking, and the facts of a topic ready to support their revision or the answering of an exam question. So, if students have got a knowledge organizer, they can start to transform the information from that document into an appropriate graphic organizer. That transformation of knowledge will help students to cement it into their long-term memory. You can also get students to fill in a blank knowledge organizer. So if you're confident in your student's ability, or maybe confident in a few of their ability to be able to do this, or possibly it's revision at the end of a topic at the end of the year, particularly helpful for year 11 students, year 10 students looking at the GCSE curriculum, give them a blank knowledge organizer, maybe with the keywords and the key dates, and get them to fill it in. And notice, low stakes testing. The pressure is low, the stress should be low. If students can't remember, don't stress about it, just allow them to identify what they need to go and revise. It's the whole point of low stakes testing, to just give students something to go away and work on. Now, if you increase the pressure and the stress on that, students are going to be put off this method. So keep it casual, keep it relaxed, give them each a blank copy and inbuild it into your practice regularly so it's not a shock when it happens. If you suddenly spring it on them in the last few weeks of year 11, they might start stressing out about it. Whereas if you've inbuilt it from year 7, it's not going to be stressful. It's just something that they're used to doing to try to put down as much information as they possibly can do. It's also a fantastic ready-made scaffold for tasks. Rather than you having to find something on TES or make a scaffold yourself to support learning, students just get the knowledge organizer out of their books or their folders, or they get it from the front of the class. You don't need to make anything in addition. If students have got those key facts down on a sheet, that is the only scaffold they're going to need 9 times out of 10 to complete the work that you are giving them. Yes, they might need support maybe on sentence starters, linking together the information, but by reducing the stress of recalling that information or those key facts, it's allowing students to get on with tasks better than they might have otherwise been able to do. So, some more ways to use them. Open book tests. So often we want to give students a little bit of a scaffold during tests, but we don't want to give them the whole books because then they're just going to copy examples. Or maybe we want to have a little bit of support with essays, but we don't want them copying an example essay they've got in their books. Give them the knowledge organizer. Yes, they're going to have all the facts on here. But what we are testing in this type of activity is the process. Can they answer the question? Can they write that essay? Is their essay writing sufficient? Now, if you're making them remember and recall the facts, you're not just testing them on the process or their ability to write their essay. You're testing them on their ability to recall facts and their ability to write an essay, i.e., you're increasing their cognitive load. If you want to assess their ability to answer a question, follow a process, plan, produce an essay, answer an exam question, give them the facts they need, and then assess to see how well they apply them. That will give you the information you need to inform your teaching moving forward. Catching up students. So if a student is off for any reason, ill, excluded, removed, detention, homework detention, whatever it might be, give them a knowledge organiser and it helps them catch up very quickly. They've got all of the facts that they missed in that last lesson, especially if you've got clearly sectioned parts of your knowledge organiser. You can say to a student, oh, while you're off ill, you missed section 1 and section 2, go home and use your effective revision strategies to learn that knowledge so that you're not behind. It also means that students aren't going to really need to copy it from other books if you make them do that, and it might also mean that you don't need to print off additional sheets or additional worksheets. Again, this is saving workload. We've mentioned that making knowledge organisers is labour intensive, but it does have its advantages later on in terms of workload. Regular retrieval practice. Now, we've kind of mentioned this a little bit in the video. Whatever you use knowledge organisers for, it needs to be regular. So if we're doing our retrieval practice, if we're giving them a blank knowledge organiser, if we're giving them flashcards, if we're getting students to test each other on content, it must be regular. Maybe make it the last 5 minutes of each lesson, or maybe make it the last half an hour of your final lesson of the week. However you want to embed it within your practice, embed it and keep it consistent. You want students to know the routine, and for those students who want to go ahead and revise and do some extra work ready for it, then this will allow them to do that. Yes, maybe you're going to need to throw in the odd retrieval practice, and it's always good to spring something on that with students, but if you've got regular retrieval practice, it is very, very beneficial, and the regularity helps students as well. Now, one thing that we currently do is we have a do now retrieval task where we get students to answer questions on topics that we've done in the previous weeks and months. You can do that with a knowledge organiser. Give students a section of a knowledge organiser that they have done a week ago, a month ago, a year ago, and get them to fill in as much as they can remember. And that could be a simple 5-minute do now task, 5 minutes going over it, and after 10 minutes, students have recalled the 5, 10, 15 facts that you needed them to know. Schema formation. So we've mentioned this. Make it very explicit how your knowledge organisers link together. If you know that a topic you've done previously links in very well to this topic, then get the students to get out their knowledge organisers and give them 5 minutes to see how the topics link together. It's extremely metacognitive to look at the connections between learning. It's extremely important for students to understand where their learning fits into a bigger picture. It helps with motivation and engagement if students can see where their learning is going, and it also helps with problem solving. So where students need to bring in different topics, where they need to bring in different strategies, if they've never been shown how to link topics together, or if they've never been given the opportunity to link topics together, they're going to struggle. If you provide them with explicit opportunity to link topics together and begin to build those schemas inside their long-term memory, to build that network of knowledge, it will support them when they're answering their problem-solving questions and when they're answering their exam questions. Knowledge organisers are brilliant for self-evaluation by students. There's nothing worse than taking a set of books home, marking them, giving feedback to students, and then them doing nothing. We need our students to be independent. We need them to be self-regulated students. We need them to identify what they can't do, why they can't do it, and what they are going to do to improve. Now, if you give students a document detailing all the facts they need to know, and they don't know 2, 3, 5, 20 of them, then they automatically know what they need to learn. You don't have to mark anything. You don't have to provide any feedback. You have done by using the knowledge organiser. It reduces your workload and it actually improves the feedback possible to students. Now, though this website might be about metacognition because it's the second best intervention you can introduce into your lessons, the best intervention, as detailed by the EEF, is actually feedback. So something even better than metacognition is this feedback. Now, students self-evaluating to give themselves feedback is the most powerful tool that there is in students learning. If students self-evaluate the facts that they don't know, if they can evaluate why they don't know them, and if they can conclude how they're going to learn them, there is nothing more powerful. So this is an incredibly important point to stress and to really train students to do. It will be difficult. Getting students to self-evaluate is, well, sometimes feels impossible. You've got to keep plugging. Start in year 7, start early. Scaffold it. Give them sentence starters, give them question starters. On our website, in the evaluation section, in the teacher part, we've given an evaluation lesson template for student self-evaluation. Go and have a look at this and see how that can support your practice as well. Spelling and key phrases testing. So if your first section of your Knowledge Organiser is keywords or key phrases, a lot of staff use this as then a weekly spelling test or a weekly key phrase test. Get students to learn it as homework. Do now in the next lesson is them doing the spelling test. Incredibly important, incredibly easy, incredibly effective. It's also a great introduction and hook. Of course, we engage students by making them learn. There's no point having fads or trying to link it to what we think students might be interested in. The best way to engage students is by helping them learn. But Knowledge Organisers not only help them learn, but they can also identify where their learning is going. Students who maybe don't even seem to care about their learning will still care about where they're going in that subject and what they're doing that day. If they've got a Knowledge Organiser, they've got a pathway for the next 2, 4, 6 weeks, maybe longer. They know where their learning is going and they know why you're going to be doing it. So it's a fantastic thing to say at the start of the lesson, today we're going to be covering section 2, and then we're going to move on to section 3 next lesson. So if you want to go home and revise it, this is what you can do. Now, the last point, I think it is anyway, is motivation. So like we've just said, it's an incredibly important hook. At the end of a lesson, it is so satisfying for a student to look back at their Knowledge Organiser and tick off a section or 2 sections. I like to tick them off as you go along because students can then really visually see how much progress they have made. If they're seeing that they've done a section, 2 sections, 3 sections, or maybe they're almost at the end of the Knowledge Organiser, that's extremely rewarding to see the knowledge they've learned. It can also help you to emphasize their learning paths from 2 weeks ago not knowing anything on that document, so maybe in 2 weeks' time they're going to know everything on that document. Extremely powerful. Now, we need to beware of some pitfalls and misconceptions around Knowledge Organisers. We might know what to do, we might know how to design them, but there are things that we slip into doing which we must avoid to make sure we are using these documents effectively. We must remember Knowledge Organisers does not equal learning. We have to teach and we have to support students in using this scaffold. It is just a scaffold at the end of the day. It's incredibly useful, but it is just a scaffold. So we need to help students to know and learn that information using the techniques provided in the previous 2 slides. If we just give them a Knowledge Organiser, they're not going to learn it. We shouldn't even expect them to learn it. They're not going to learn it. They're going to need support and effective strategies to do it. Students will need to be taught how to use Knowledge Organisers. There's no point as giving them a Knowledge Organiser and saying, go home and revise it, or go and do some low stakes testing. Unless students know what that looks like, and unless they've practiced it with your support, they're not going to be able to do it. So be explicit in lesson. Show students how to do it. Model it effectively. This is where the idea of metacognition comes in. Show what you're thinking and explain why you are thinking it. Show how you do it and show and explain why you're doing it in that method. So if you're using flashcards, explain why, explain how to do them, and explain why low stakes testing is so important. Do students know how to revise? Do we as teachers know how to revise? Often you'll see students highlighting, doing pretty pictures, writing out notes. Very, very nice, very lovely. not very effective. The way that students learn and the way that we revise is by testing, low-stakes testing, elaboration, flashcards, exam questions, past papers, explaining to others, elaboration. Do students know that? We need to make sure that they understand the best ways to revise. We're going to be doing a video on revision strategies soon on the website. So if you're not totally sure you want a video to sort of support your practice, then go and check that out. Now, it will be difficult to use knowledge organisers if classroom routines aren't in place. If you have a class that isn't quite on task, if you have a class that you can't maybe trust to do a little bit of the pair work, it's going to be a bit more difficult to embed these knowledge organisers. You're going to need to have these strong classroom routines to ensure that you are going to be able to implement these knowledge organisers effectively. Make sure that you're not trying to push the students too far, because obviously if students don't understand what they're doing, you might have behavioural issues. You need to make sure that students are clear on how to use these knowledge organisers and how it supports their learning. Otherwise, it's going to be a piece of paper that's turned into a paper aeroplane. Are they being used effectively? If you are not following the 14 strategies listed in the previous 2 slides, not all of them, but some of them, they're not going to be being used effectively. Don't waste your time producing a fantastic document and then not using it. You need to use it effectively using the strategies outlined. There will be at least a few of those 14 strategies which help you embed it into your practice. You need to be using some of them. A few more things that we need to be cautious about. Are they integrated or a bolt-on? Don't just produce knowledge organisers and then mention them every 2 or 3 weeks. They need to be a key part of your retrieval practice, your do now practice, your main independent practice, your plenary practice, and your homework practice. If you just say, oh, we're going to have a look at our knowledge organisers today, and you don't bring them out until next term, they're pointless. It's a bolt-on. You're not going to have any impact. If you're expecting impact from them, but not using them and not embedding them, you're not going to see any positive impact. This is possibly more for faculty leaders and for senior leadership, but you need to ensure they are standardized and follow design standards. We've produced a video on the design standards you need in a knowledge organizer. Make sure you are following them. It's not because we're strict, it's because we want you to be producing knowledge organizers that are effective. If you aren't following those guidelines, your knowledge organizers won't be as effective. Are you ensuring only required information is on those documents? If you are asking students to memorize too much or facts that aren't required, it isn't going to be as beneficial. You're going to be overloading them. You're going to not be following those cognitive load theories and ideas of reducing load on students. We can only expect them to learn the key facts within a topic. Minimize those facts, reduce them down as much as possible, set them out following the design standards set, and you will be doing well. Now, knowledge organisers only provide a basic level of learning. So what I mean by this is just knowing the facts of a topic doesn't mean you can answer the exam questions on a topic or the SATs questions on a topic or whatever it might be. You need to then use this information and knowledge to build up to your problem solving, to build up to your exam questions. So it's a support, it's a scaffold for students to be able to reach those top levels. It isn't an automatic jump to those top levels. So you need to be building it in to practice. So, like mentioned, you can transform this information to a graphic organizer that supports metacognitive planning, and as we will show in our future graphic organizer metacognition videos, it can be used for other activities then as well. Can you get students to explain, either orally or written, the different sections of a knowledge organizer? Can you get them to pair and share and explain the facts, explain the dates up to World War II? No point a student regurgitating them. They need to be able to explain why they were significant. Why did they happen? Why did it lead to the start of World War I or World War II or whatever it might be? So get students to write it down, provide them with sentence starters if required, or just get them to pair and share, get them to do it in groups, get them to do presentations to the class. And exam questions. Once students know those facts, get them to do exam questions. Like we've mentioned, Maybe give them the knowledge organizer so that they're not trying to recall all of the facts and they're actually focusing on the application of that knowledge. Later, they can focus on trying to do facts and application. But there are two sections, aren't there? They need to know the facts and they need to know how to apply the facts. Well, reduce the load by removing the need for the memorizing of the facts by giving them the knowledge organizer and just let them focus on applying that knowledge. Right, if you're not leadership, then the next slide or slide or two might not be as useful for you, but feel free to stick around if you do want to find out. Otherwise, these are guidelines and suggestions for leadership, so faculty heads, CPD leads, or even higher leadership, to understand how knowledge organisers need to be embedded within the school environment. So firstly, as a faculty lead, you need to ensure a standardised version across your department. Agree with teachers what the format will be and why, so that all staff are on board, and ensure that it is being done in that format. You don't want to come back to it in a month, a term, 2 terms, and find that all of the knowledge organisers are in different formats. Settle on one, own it, and use it. Right, staff need to have sufficient training on what a high quality knowledge organiser looks like. It might just be a case of directing them to watching these videos. Yes, it might be an hour out of their time, but it's better to spend an hour watching these videos to make sure they know A, how to design, and B, how to implement knowledge organisers than you possibly just trying to fit it into 5 minutes. Like I say, they also need to know how to implement them into lessons. You might have files and files of beautiful knowledge organisers for all of the classes, all of the abilities, all of the subjects. But unless staff know how to implement them into lessons, following the 14 points detailed above, they're going to be a relative waste of time. Staff need to be using them effectively, they need to be embedding them into their lessons, and they need to be confident in doing that. Do staff need training and support in doing this? You also need to consider what your quality assurance for both of these factors look like. How are you ensuring that the knowledge organisers are of a high enough standard? Should be relatively easy just by taking in a sample and reviewing, maybe cross faculty, so maths takes in English takes in maths, and if both subject specialists can understand a different subject specialist, then they're probably of the right level. It's more difficult to look at the quality assurance of implementing them into lessons, but it could be done through book scrutinies or observations if your schools carry out observations. But obviously the key thing here is support of staff. It is a complicated topic that is complicated to implement and requires support. So what school changes, maybe it's CPD, maybe it's student training, maybe it's assemblies, what supports you need to put in place to be able to support staff in implementing these effectively. Now, I've recommended significantly that knowledge organisers are used as part of a homework strategy. Is your homework policy in line with this? If you want knowledge organisers to be part of the homework strategy, does your homework policy reflect this? Do parents and guardians know that? And do students know that? A lot of schools solely use knowledge organisers for homework. If this is the case, make it explicit, make it clear, and make sure all stakeholders are aware of this. Right, thank you for listening and engaging with the CPD. I hope that it was useful. Hopefully now you've got 14 strategies to implement your knowledge organisers into the classroom, and hopefully for those in leadership, you know how to best support staff and implement them within your faculties and across school. If you do have any issues, concerns, or any questions, feel free to get in touch with us via email on our website or via Twitter. Thank you.